Imagine walking into like a high-stakes casino where the house doesn't just want your money. I mean, they actively want your sanity.
Oh yeah, they want everything.
Right. The games aren't just mathematically rigged so you lose. They are engineered from the ground up to make you willingly destroy yourself and, somehow thank the dealer for the privilege.
It's totally wild.
It is. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, we're looking at a huge stack of excerpts from the dark romance thriller Chaotic by Shantel Tessier. And since you already follow this universe, you know we are stepping into the wildly extreme, completely subterranean world of a secret society known as the Lords.
Which is just terrifying on every level.
Completely. Our mission today isn't just to recap the plot, though. It's to really dissect the specific mechanisms of power at play here. We're exploring how the two main protagonists, Kashton and Everett, navigate unimaginable trauma, absolute power, and weaponized psychological manipulation.
Yeah, because the source material is incredibly intense.
Yeah.
I mean, it operates almost as a case study in totalitarian control. It really forces us to examine the terrifying architecture of systemic manipulation.
Exactly. And while you listening to this will hopefully never cross paths with a deadly secret society.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But unpacking the extreme power dynamics in this fictional world actually offers profound insights. It shows us, in a highly magnified way, exactly how control, isolation, and manipulation operate in real-world institutional structures. So, okay. Let's unpack this.
Right. So to start, the foundational architecture of the Lords relies on absolute, unquestioning devotion. They essentially strip away bodily autonomy before an initiate even realizes what they've signed away.
And we see this concentrated at Barrington University, right?
Yes, exactly. Barrington serves as the society's kind of Ivy League training ground. To even secure membership, an initiate has to survive 3 brutal trials. And on top of that, a chosen initiate must remain entirely celibate for his first 3 years.
Wait, 3 years?
3 full years. They are physically owned by the society, and eventually they don't even get to choose a partner. They're mandated to marry a lady selected for them, purely to ensure the society's secrets remain, hermetically sealed.
Wow. And within that structure, the absolute apex predators are the Spade brothers.
Mm-hmm. Kashton is one of them.
Right, Kashton. They are the ultimate enforcers. They're the judge, jury, and executioner who just erase any lord who breaks an oath. But earning that rank requires surviving environments designed to completely hollow a person out. Walk us through Kashton's freshman initiation at Carnage.
Oh, Carnage. It's a subterranean arena, and the trial there is just a masterclass in physical degradation. Before the fight even begins, Kashton is locked away in a cold concrete cell for days.
Days, just alone.
Completely alone. He is intentionally starved and subjected to sensory deprivation. The isolation is engineered to fracture his mind before his body even takes a single hit.
That is brutal.
It is. And then, mere moments before he is forced onto the stage, a Spade brother injects him with a massive dose of adrenaline. He's thrown into the ring against a man who has 50 pounds on him, armed with nothing but a single knife.
That adrenaline injection is fascinating to me. Because it's not an advantage, right? It's more like redlining a car engine.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You get a temporary burst of incredible speed, but you are absolutely guaranteed to blow the transmission the second you cross the finish line. It blurs his vision and ensures a massive, debilitating physical crash later.
Exactly.
Yet Kashton survives by slicing the larger man's neck from ear to ear, and the visual the author paints is just haunting. Kashton is drenched in blood, dropping to his knees, and he's staring defiantly into the crowd, locking eyes with his own father.
The very man who orchestrated this entire nightmare.
Yeah. His own dad. It's insane.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Lords aren't just testing physical endurance here. They are testing the boundaries of compliance. A gladiator fight is barbaric, sure, but the true horror of this society is the mandate of willing submission.
They want them to choose it.
Right. The initiates have to actively consent to the abuse. The system doesn't just want to break them. It requires them to hand over their own humanity and agree that the hollowing out is completely justified.
See, I look at that setup and I have to push back on the society's claim that this is a standard test of compliance.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, to me, this circles back to that rigged casino analogy I mentioned earlier. Kashton's father actively stars him and purposefully drains his energy beforehand because he actually wants Kashton to fail.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, the father views Kashton's natural sense of empathy, specifically his fierce loyalty to his chosen brothers, as a fatal flaw. The game is rigged specifically against Kashton's humanity.
That's a really solid point. But physical compliance just isn't enough for a system this paranoid. Once they prove they can break your body, they have to prove they own your mind.
Right.
Which is exactly why the sophomore trial shifts entirely from physical violence to concentrated psychological warfare.
Which takes us to the drugged brandy. Break down the mechanics of this second trial for us.
So Kashton is called into his father's office and given a drink laced with a super potent hallucinogen. He wakes up disoriented, back in the basement of carnage, plunged into a waking nightmare that is customized to his deepest psychological vulnerabilities.
It's basically his own personal hell.
Exactly. He hears the screams of his childhood friend, Ashton. He's running frantically through the corridors trying to find the right key to her cell, but the hallucination forces him to watch a lord brutally assault and murder her.
Oh my God.
And the author uses incredibly visceral sensory details here, like the rusted, jagged gag in her mouth, the blood. It's designed to induce a state of absolute paralyzing panic.
Wait, so the father doesn't just drug him. He specifically programs the hallucination to target Kashton's inability to save the people he loves.
Yes.
Because right after that, Kashton stumbles into the next room and finds his 3 chosen brothers, Adam, Saint, and Hayden, the only people he actually cares about. And they're all hanging from the ceiling with their throats slit.
It's just total psychological devastation. And then the trap snaps shut. Kashton finds himself cuffed to a chair, and his father delivers the final blow.
What does he say?
He tells Kashton that this blood is on his hands, that his slowness, his failure to act, is what killed his brothers in Ashton. Then the father places a revolver on the table with a single bullet and gives his son exactly 60 seconds to execute himself out of sheer guilt.
60 seconds? That's so messed up.
He literally leverages Kashton's love for his brothers against him, arguing that they will torture him in hell, so he might as well just get it over with.
The father is literally trying to prove that compassion is a lethal liability. He wants Kashton to conclude that caring about anyone outside the Lord's hierarchy will just destroy him.
Yeah, he wants to burn that empathy out of him completely.
But Kashton defies the script. He picks up the gun with shaking hands, and he intentionally fires the single bullet into the wall right next to his father's chest, refusing to take his own life. To me, surviving this is essentially an emotional inoculation.
Wait, emotional inoculation? How do you mean?
Think about how a vaccine works, right? It introduces a weakened, carefully controlled version of a deadly virus into your system so your immune system learns exactly how to destroy it.
Okay, yeah.
So by subjecting Kashton to his absolute worst possible fear, the total violent loss of his chosen family, and that crushing weight of guilt, the father accidentally administers the vaccine.
Oh, wow. I see where you're going with this.
Kashton survives his worst nightmare.
Awesome.
Once you have already lived through the absolute worst thing your mind can possibly conjure, what leverage does the system have left over you?
None. They've played their best card.
Exactly. Kashton surviving this hallucination makes him vastly more dangerous because he is now fundamentally fearless.
That is brilliant. The system's attempt to sever his attachments ultimately immunizes him against their primary method of control. But, while Kashton is inoculated against the system from the inside, the text introduces someone forged entirely outside its protections. We need to shift our focus to Everett.
Yes, Everett. The childhood chapters detailing her backstory are just harrowing. She is kept in total, suffocating isolation by her abusive father. No school, no peers, no contact with the outside world whatsoever.
It's essentially solitary confinement for a child.
It is. She is forced to wear a sheer, itchy nightgown and told repeatedly that her only function is to be seen, not heard. She is treated as a piece of furniture. And to cope with this absolute deprivation, an 8-year-old Everett develops an imaginary friend with blonde braids.
What's fascinating here is the underlying neuroscience of trauma. Everett is experiencing profound systemic dissociation. In an environment of total powerlessness and severe emotional neglect, a child's developing brain simply cannot process the reality of their trauma without collapsing.
So what does the brain do?
It literally builds a firewall. It splits reality to create a companion. It is a desperate, tragic, but brilliantly adaptive survival mechanism. Her mind constructs a safety hatch to ensure her core identity doesn't completely shatter.
And rather than recognizing this survival mechanism for what it is, the adults in this universe actively pathologize it. Like, there is this chilling scene where a woman wearing striking red-bottomed heels, visits Everett's father.
Oh, I remember this scene.
Yeah, she watches an 8-year-old child in a sheer nightgown talking to empty air. And rather than showing a single shred of concern for a clearly traumatized, isolated little girl, the woman casually suggests to the father that Everett has schizophrenia. She completely gaslights the trauma response she is witnessing.
It's the perfect encapsulation of how the Lords view vulnerability. Any emotional need or trauma response is immediately categorized as a defect to be managed, rather than a human condition requiring care.
It also starkly highlights the staggering systemic misogyny embedded in the Lord's culture. I mean, women are entirely disposable to them. They're just bargaining chips or ornamental objects.
Right, they aren't even people to them.
But this intense societal blind spot actually becomes Everett's ultimate weapon later in life. The men in this society are so deeply conditioned to view women as weak, mindless accessories that it creates a literal flaw in their threat assessment matrix. They physically cannot fathom that a woman could be a predator.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the collision between Kashton's internal rebellion and Everett's external dismantling of the Lords. The text details 2 highly specific encounters that define their dynamic, starting during Kashton's junior year on the mega yacht, the Isabella.
Set the scene for us there, because the rules at this stage are still incredibly strict, right?
Oh, absolutely. Kashton and his brothers are operating under covert assassination orders, and Kashton is still bound by his 3-year vow of absolute celibacy. During the mission, he bumps into a blonde woman in a red silk dress who calls herself Eve.
And she seems totally harmless.
Totally. She presents as terribly clumsy, dropping her phone, projecting sheer terror regarding the cruel lord she is accompanying. But later, Kashton hears her screaming in the owner's suite.
Which triggers that empathy his dad tried to destroy.
Exactly. Driven by that same lingering empathy, Kashton bursts in, finds the Lord attempting an assault, and brutally strangles the man to death with a phone charger cord.
He believes he has saved a helpless victim. And in the aftermath, despite his strict celibacy vows, Kashton gives in to his attraction to her vulnerability. He breaks his oath by intimately touching her while the dead Lord's body is lying merely feet away on the floor.
It's a huge risk for him.
A massive risk. But the moment Kashton turns his back to answer his phone, she vanishes into thin air, leaving only her ripped dress behind. And it haunts him for 4 long years.
Until he tracks her down to a rundown, isolated motel, room 111.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the entire paradigm just shifts. Before Kashton follows her to room 111, he observes her at a dive bar. She is dressed in smudged mascara and fishnets, playing the role of a sloppy, intoxicated woman perfectly.
She's totally playing a part.
Flawlessly. She lures a wealthy lord out of the bar. Kashton is furious, operating under the assumption that he needs to play the savior again, so he waits a few minutes before literally kicking down the motel room door.
But he doesn't find a victim.
No. Instead, he finds the wealthy lord dead on the bed. His throat slit from ear to ear, with a specific lord's crest branded violently into his chest.
The illusion completely shatters for him.
It does, because Kashton finds her hidden black duffel bag tucked under the bed. And it isn't just full of weapons, like there's a hammer, a rope, a suppressed gun, a knife. It represents a massive psychological realization for him.
That she was never a victim.
Right. Everett was never a victim on that yacht. She is a highly trained, cold-blooded assassin who specifically hunts the lords, that clumsy, terrified act on the yacht. A disguise, the sloppy drunk act at the bar, a disguise. She's weaponizing her trauma.
It's so brilliant.
She lures these men in by playing the exact role their systemic misogyny expects her to play, the weak, easily manipulated object, and then uses their arrogance to slaughter them.
It is a masterful psychological reclamation of power. Let's analyze another scene that really cements this inversion.
Yeah.
Later in the text, Everett is at the Society's cathedral. She is tasked with medically stitching up a lord who has just been tortured during a confessional, which, by the way, is the lord's twisted, violent version of an interrogation.
Right, yeah.
So she is standing over this bleeding, terrified man strapped to an altar. And what is she doing? She is softly humming the nursery rhyme, "Hush, little baby."
Oh, that's Creepy.
Very. Now compare that to a scene later where she is driving away from a successful assassination, blasting an adrenaline-pumping song called Dopamine.
The juxtaposition is brilliant, but why hum a lullaby over a bleeding man?
Because she has taken the absolute powerlessness that was forced upon her in childhood and completely inverted it. By humming a nursery rhyme while literally holding the life of a high-ranking lord in her hands, she is mocking the very institution that tried to keep her an infant. She is reclaiming the agency that was stolen from her. The lords don't see her coming because their entire worldview is built on the assumption of their own supremacy.
So Everett is systematically dismantling the lords from the outside, but the text simultaneously reveals that the society is rotting from the inside out, completely driven by fractured loyalties among the Spade brothers.
The foundational pillars of their totalitarian rule are just crumbling. And it all centers around Kashton's brother Adam.
Okay, let's break down this betrayal because it's massive. Kashton has been operating under the belief that Adam committed suicide to protect their friend Easton, who goes by Sin.
Right.
Driven by pure grief and rage, Kashton confronts Sin at his house. Kashton brutally beats Sin right in front of Sin's pregnant wife, Ellie, because he's furious that Sin didn't trust the Spade brothers enough to ask for help. But the glaring anomaly is that Sin, who is a highly lethal enforcer, just takes the beating. He completely refuses to fight back.
Which immediately signals to us that the narrative we've been fed is fabricated. Highly trained killers do not passively accept brutal punishment without a profound underlying reason.
And that reason is revealed shortly after. Kashton receives a mysterious midnight summons to an airfield. He arrives with his remaining brothers, Saint and Hayden. The door to a private jet opens and Adam walks out. Alive and perfectly healthy.
The whole suicide was fake.
It was a meticulously staged cover-up. Adam reveals he's actually running a covert operation against a horrific human trafficking ring operated by a faction of the lords known as the Dollhouse. And the most devastating part, Sin knew Adam was alive the entire time.
He took the beating on purpose.
Exactly. Sin knowingly absorbed Kashton's brutal beating, risking his own life and his pregnant wife's safety solely to protect Adam's secret operation from the wider society.
This raises an important question. What happens to a totalitarian society when its chief enforcers stop believing in the mission?
It falls apart, right?
Exactly. The lords sustain their power through absolute terror and forced compliance. But the Spade brothers, the very instruments designed to execute that terror, have quietly shifted their allegiances. They are no longer loyal to the institution of the lords. Their loyalty is exclusively to each other.
That makes so much sense.
From a purely structural standpoint, when the top-tier enforcers begin keeping massive systemic secrets from the leadership to protect one another, the entire societal structure is mathematically doomed. It just cannot sustain its own weight.
It's the exact dynamic of a mafia family on the brink of collapse.
Oh, good comparison.
Imagine a crime syndicate where the top hitmen suddenly realize they have vastly more in common with each other than they do with the boss giving the orders. The boss's power is entirely an illusion. It only exists as long as the hitmen are willing to pull the trigger. Once those hitmen start pulling the trigger for the boss, and start pulling it to protect each other, the empire is finished. Standing on that dark airfield, Kashton realizes that his volatile anger pushes his brothers away. But the much deeper tragedy is that the society's brutal, unforgiving rules literally mandate this betrayal.
They do.
The system is so deeply toxic that honesty guarantees death. They have to lie to each other just to keep each other breathing.
It highlights the ultimate failure of the Lord's architectural design. I mean, they built trials specifically to beat empathy out of these men, but they failed. They only succeeded in narrowing its focus. Kashton doesn't care about the Lord's mandates. He only cares about his brother's survival.
We've covered some incredibly dark, fascinating territory today. We analyzed the illusion of control within the initiation trials, the mechanics of emotional inoculation, and how profound, isolating trauma can forge a chilling resilience in characters like Everett.
It really is a heavy but important text.
It is, and it forces you to look at the real world differently. Because we all navigate power structures and we all wear masks. Sometimes people wear masks to survive oppressive systems, and sometimes they wear them to hide their true capabilities.
That's very true.
But in the universe of the Lords, true strength doesn't look like a muscle-bound enforcer holding a knife in a subterranean arena. True strength looks like a supposedly fragile woman dropping her phone on a yacht. So what does this all mean?
Well, it leaves us with a really compelling philosophical paradox to mull over. The Lords constructed a ruthless subterranean society designed specifically to surgically extract empathy from its members, viewing compassion as a fatal weakness. Yet, looking at the trajectory of these characters, we have to wonder, could Kashton's stubborn, lingering compassion and Everett's deeply buried humanity be the precise tools required to dismantle the machine?
Wow.
It suggests that the very humanity a corrupt system attempts to destroy is often the exact weapon that eventually burns the entire institution to the ground.
It's the ultimate realization. You walk up to that rigged casino game, you realize the house is playing you, and you decide the only way to truly win is to just lock the doors and set the whole building on fire.
Exactly. Burn it down.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of power and trauma. We'll see you next time.